If you're here, it's probably because the last spell has caught your interest a lot like it's caught mine. I've put in about 450 hours on stream playing the last spell, and I've learned a lot about the systems and strategies needed to win even at the highest levels. But in today's video and the videos to follow, I'm going to be covering the absolute basics of the last spell, getting you going from zero to the point where you're winning normal runs consistently. So without further ado, let's do it. The last spell is as rewarding as it is challenging. And that means that for new players, it can be a pretty overwhelming experience trying to wrap your mind around not only all the systems of the game, but how you leverage those systems into winning runs. So in this video and the ones that follow, we're going to be going back to basics, answering the very fundamental questions around the nature of the last spell and its systems in a way that is as approachable as possible. So to begin this journey, we have to start at the absolute beginning and answer the question, what is the last spell? The developers described the last spell as a tactical, turn-based RPG roguelite. To tackle these in reverse order, just because, roguelite refers to the fact that each run starts from essentially zero and you play through either until you win or you lose. The light, though, refers to the fact that as you play more and more, you will be unlocking things in part of a meta progression system that might make things easier, add complexity to the game, add flexibility to the game. As for RPG, that refers to the fact that in the last spell, you are going to be managing a roster of heroes. Those heroes will have names, portraits, and you'll be deciding how they level up, what weapons they wield, what equipment they wear, and a whole host of other details about them. You'll also be managing a town and trying to create a thriving economy through the construction of buildings, the salvaging of ruins. Next up, we'll tackle tactical and turn-based together. Say that 10 times fast. But basically, both of these mean that the nature of the gameplay is very tactical in its nature. You'll be making decisions, and you won't be time pressured around them because you will have a turn that can last for as short or as long as you need it to, and you will be allocating and utilizing all of the resources at your disposal, and when you hit the end turn button, only then does the enemy respond. Like many games of this nature, it's divided into two distinct pieces. There is what I like to think of as an economy piece and the tactical piece. And we alluded to both of those previously, but the economy piece is all about the production of your town and the equipping and development of your heroes, while the nighttime phase or combat phase, in this particular case, the tactical phase, is all about how you utilize the power that you have created during the production phase in order to defend against a horde of zombies that are trying to eat all of your heroes and tear down the spell that is being channeled in the middle of your town. Roughly speaking, the goals of the game are to survive, and you survive by creating the most formidable set of defenses and the most formidable roster of heroes that you possibly can, and then decimating the enemy horde every turn until eventually they dwindle to nothing. But we're already getting ahead of ourselves. The place to begin is before you even start a run. When you start up the last spell, you are going to be presented with a tutorial, but after you get through the tutorial, you'll be presented with a couple of options before you even start a game. We're going to devote an entire video to talking about this kind of like pre-game, for lack of a better descriptor, but at a very high level, you will pick your map from one of the 5 maps that exist. You have Swampfurt, Gildenberg, Lakeburg, Glenwall, and Elderlicht. We'll be talking about those in more detail as well. You will then select a set of omens. These are gameplay modifiers that can do an incredible host of different things. They can make enemy corpses from previous nights explode. They can increase the number of druid staffs that you find, or any number of other things. And then finally, you will select an apocalypse difficulty. And while we won't cover it in much detail here, I do just want to say for those that are just taking a look or thinking about buying the last spell, the difference between normal difficulty and Apocalypse 6 is a pretty massive divide, and the developers have done a great job making the highest difficulty levels feel very challenging and very rewarding. After you've made your selections, you will enter into the game in what is called the deployment phase. The deployment phase is basically your opportunity to place your heroes in the locations they need to be on the grid-based map to respond to the threat that is coming. You'll notice a pink arrow. This indicates where the horde is coming from, and you will place your heroes on that particular side of your town and get ready for the onslaught. As you exit the deployment phase, enemies will start coming out of the mist. Canonically, the mist is just the purple stuff that surrounds the village, and it is full of terrors. The night that you are now in will last until either you kill all of the bad guys or the bad guys kill you. Each turn, it will be your job to allocate the resources available to your heroes in order to maximize the devastation on the enemy horde. The resources that I'm referring to are your heroes' action points. Those are the things that allow you to swing your sword or wield your hammer or send a magic bolt out of your tome. Your movement points, these are how your heroes move around the grid. Your heroes have a limited number of movement points, but you can use them in any combination. So you could do 2 actions, then move, then do 2 actions, then move again. And then the final 2 resources are mana and health. Health is that resource that if your hero runs out of it, they die, although there are wounds that we'll talk about in more detail later, so having low health is not good. And then mana, which is your limited resource that you can use to cast more devastating abilities. Both health and mana only regenerate after the night is over when you enter the production phase, so be wary that these are meant to be scarce resources that are meant to limit you. You're not supposed to be able to cast your most powerful spells over and over and over again throughout the night. Once you've done all the things that you want to do in your turn, you will hit the end turn button and then the horde will respond. The horde's response is generally that they will all walk in a direction that moves them closer to the center of the map. Some enemies flank, but that's kind of beside the point. And then after they move the maximum distance they can, they will attack whatever they can within that space. That might be your walls, your buildings, your heroes, random barricades, trees, it doesn't really matter. The other thing that the horde does is generate panic. So when they are at their final destination and doing their attacks, if they are hitting things that are part of your town, you are going to generate panic. Panic is represented by a bar in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, and as enemies do bad things to you, your panic will increase, and as it crosses thresholds, the amount of rewards you get at the end of the night will diminish. There are 3 things that generate panic. You have enemies attacking buildings. This generates a lot of panic. So if your blacksmith has a zombie knocking his door, you're not going to have a good time. Enemies that are within the confines of your base. There's a perimeter essentially on the map, and any enemies within that perimeter will also generate panic. And then last and most controversially, if the zombies are clawing at your walls, that will generate a small amount of panic. If you're lucky enough to survive the night, the amount of panic that you accumulated during the previous battle is going to be incredibly important because it is going to feed directly into the rewards that you get. If you generate little to no panic, you will get S rank, which comes with a really good item, lots of gold, and lots of materials. A rank is the next tier down. That gives you a worse item, but still an item, less gold, less materials, and then it attenuates all the way down to F rank, where you're getting very little gold and very little materials. And needless to say, you're not going to have a good time if you are consistently getting bad rankings, and you're going to find yourself starved moving into the later nights when you need to have generated a lot more power. Speaking of items, if you survive a night, you will enter the production phase. At the beginning of the production phase, all of your buildings that produce stuff like gold mines and scavenger camps and armorers will produce the allotted amount. You can upgrade them so they produce more. And then you will take all of the resources that you got from your reward from defeating the horde, from whatever your buildings produced and whatever your workers can generate. Your workers have the ability to scrap ruins and things like that, but you will take all of those resources and you will further develop your town. That might involve building new buildings during the production phase or upgrading existing buildings. You might need a mana well because you spent a lot of mana and you need to replenish your hero's mana. But the choices are myriad, and the decisions that you make are going to directly inform how you develop your heroes moving forward. Are you going to have 2 armorers, which means you're generating a lot of armor, or are you going to invest in jewelers instead so you have a lot of trinkets for your heroes? The production phase is also the time when you use building abilities. So you might use your seer to push back the fog. You might use the inn to hire an additional hero. You'll also be building your static defenses. This is what you use those bricks, the materials for, is building catapults and ballista and traps and potentially fortifying your walls or filling in the gaps, because the village is not in a great state when you inherit it. But finally, the last thing that you can do during the production phase is strengthen your heroes. Your heroes gain experience from battling the horde, and then you can use that to level up your heroes, give them more movement, or make them do more damage, or make their propagate attacks propagate more. There's lots and lots of different level up options, and you want to be thinking about how you build your heroes into the strongest potential defenders that you can. In each run, you'll be alternating between production phase and combat phase until you reach the final night of the map. You can tell how many nights a map has by the number of pink pips that are filled in or empty above the last spell, which is the circular building in the center of your town. Speaking of the end of runs, each map has a unique boss that you will need to be building up and getting ready to defeat during the entire course of your playthrough, as the bosses are generally a big step up in difficulty. In addition to the boss, some maps have unique dynamics. You might find that a map has more varied attack patterns or unique enemies that show up on certain waves. These are all things that we'll discuss in more detail when we talk about map-specific strategy. Last but not least is meta progression. It's kind of a thread that is woven through the gameplay of the game, in the sense that it doesn't exist only outside of the game, but you can also be paying attention to and engaging with the meta progression system throughout your individual runs. There's 2 halves to the meta progression system. I like to refer to them as dark and light side. You can also refer to them as the purple side and the yellow side, but the short version is that the light side or yellow side is achievement based. If you stun 400 enemies in a given run, you will be rewarded with a set of armor that is good for characters that like to stun things. On the purple or dark side, you're going to be spending a resource called Tainted Essence that you accumulate at the end of each night, at the end of each run, and also from certain actions during the production phase that you can spend at your discretion. So you can prioritize certain upgrades on the dark side as you see fit, and you can use that to unlock certain structures, additional stats for your heroes, additional omens. We'll cover all that in a great deal more depth moving forward, but the meta progression system is there to keep the game simple at the beginning and expand it in terms of complexity, flexibility, and depth moving forward. So that's all the systems and stuff of the last spell. We didn't go into any of it particularly deeply. That's what the subsequent videos that I'll be making are going to do. But to give you a little preview of what those videos are, the first one is going to be all about what I'm referring to as the pregame, the omen system, the apocalypse settings, meta progression, and an orientation to each map. What does it look like? What's the deal with it? How to think about it. After that, I'll be doing a video on preparation and production, aka the daytime phase. What should your town layouts look like? How should you use your workers? What should you be scavenging? How to take advantage of corpse piles, gold mines, scavenger camps, how to use the shop, what production buildings do, how they work, what the utility buildings are, why they're important, and then a map-specific build order for each map. As a note, there was a complete reset of the meta progression system of the game not long ago, and on my first 4 runs, I one-shot each of the 4 maps. So I will go through the specific build and approach that I took to do that, so that hopefully you can follow along at home and also one-shot the initial maps and get everything unlocked. After we're done with preparation and production, the next video that I'll be making is on the heroes. What are their stats? What do they mean? How to think about them? How you should go about leveling up and engaging with the level up system? What perks are good? What perks are bad? How does the perk system work? Gear. What weapons are good, what weapons are bad, how to think about gearing up, the philosophy of specialization of heroes, and in concert with that, also the concept of builds, essentially like cookie cutter ideas of directions you can push heroes. Once we're done talking about the heroes, we're going to have to get into combat. We'll talk about the nighttime in terms of deployment, the mechanics, right? So how does multi-hit exactly work? How does propagate work? How should you be thinking about it? Threat assessment. When you look at the map, how do you identify the things that are going to kill you, for lack of a better descriptor? Turn planning and execution, right? How do you plan out what you're going to do, figure out the appropriate places to move so that you can do what you need to do, managing your resources in a way that also maximizes the kills while minimizing panic, and then map-specific strategies. Certain maps have choke points that are great for melee heroes, or certain maps have big open areas that really need a character that has a lot of range. And then last but not least, I'll be doing a video on the bestiary. So the last spell has a pretty awesome and diverse set of enemies. So I want to talk through each of them, what they're good at, what they're bad at, how to think about them, what strategies you should use for defending against them if there's any gotchas related to them, and then also thinking about the elite versions of those enemies. So that's the next 5 videos. If you're watching this in the future, they may already be out. But for now, if that's something you're interested in, please think about leaving me a like and a subscription so you don't miss out on those videos when I release them. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.